What's going on, guys? This is Mike with Michael Anthony Photography. Thank you for checking out my article in this month's Shutter magazine. This month is a little bit different from our usual camera techniques. We are talking about editing software and specifically ON1 Photo RAW 2017. This is ON1 Software's newest RAW conversion program. It's meant to rival Lightroom with some features that would be used in a program like Photo Mechanic as well. It was designed from the ground up in order to help photographers have an all-in-one solution for RAW conversion. If you guys are like me, you're likely using Lightroom to process your images, especially if you're a wedding and a portrait photographer. If you're doing something like fashion or commercial work where you're only delivering a few images at a time, Capture One is and has always been probably your best solution for that type of work. But if you're a wedding or a portrait photographer and you are typically delivering hundreds of images from a session, even if you're up to like 50 to 60 images from a session, you need a better solution than Capture One because you need some library functionality. You need to be able to organize your images, tag them, and you need to be able to work quickly from image to image. Lightroom has been our best solution for a long time, mainly because it integrates with all of Adobe's other programs such as Photoshop and things like that. But ON1 has seen the shortcomings in Lightroom, mainly in the performance aspect of it, and they designed a new program that is supposed to be better in those aspects. Now, I will, if you guys did read my article, you will know that there are definitely some improvements that can be made to this particular software. But I do want to touch on one thing, and that is that this software is just about a month old as of the time that I'm writing this article. It definitely will improve over time. I do know that the people over at ON1 are working to squash all the bugs with the software and also deliver on the promises of speed that were promised to us during the promotion of this particular software. So I just want to go into it a little bit, give you guys some background on basically how to use it and also what some of the functionalities of it can be. So if I click on this button over here, this is my browse module. This is supposed to be like the library module in Photo Mechanic. This allows me to go through my images. It's going to allow me to tag them, to create different sorts of categories, all things that you can already do in Lightroom. The biggest benefit to ON1's program here is that you can do this a lot quicker than you can in Lightroom. Photo Mechanic still is much faster than this program, but you're talking about milliseconds, and truthfully, the amount of time you're going to be spending switching from program to program will probably make up that difference in time anyway. So if I'm looking at a RAW file, you can see right here, this is the grid mode, right? So if I want to go from photo to photo, I can do it, and I can do it relatively fast. And you can see as I'm changing through images here, previews will render. So for instance, when I click on these images, you can see it takes about a half second to load the image in full resolution. Now, even if you go and you render previews in Lightroom, it still takes about a half a second, maybe a little bit longer to actually render the preview as well. But this time in ON1 Photo RAW, you actually don't have to render previews beforehand. You could just open the files and start working, which is a huge benefit if you are organizing and sorting through lots of photos at a single time. So if I'm going through here and I'm looking through my images, I can tag them, I can add color filters to them. All those features here are actually available to you if you use this to organize your particular images. There's a lot of features here that I haven't had the need to use yet, but things like albums and also your favorite functions, those are really, really useful if you are culling a wedding, for instance, or culling a photo shoot. The next thing I want to show you guys is the develop module. This is the one thing that ON1 promised would be a lot more efficient than Lightroom. And in some ways it is. In other ways, it definitely can be improved. I'm going to start with the first and most obvious aspect of it, the one thing that we were looking for, and that is obviously the speed. Now, the one thing that I saw in this software that needs improvement is image-to-image edits or image-to-image time. So when you're clicking from image to image, it does take a long time. There also is a weird little bug, and maybe specific to my system here, but it also may be something that is noticed by a lot of other photographers as well. When I am in this format right here, or this view, should I say, if I'm using my arrow buttons to go from one image to the next, nothing happens. It doesn't work, right? As soon as I click in the film strip on the bottom and I start pushing next, it will work. Now, if you're looking here, and I want you guys to see the different, or sorry, I want you to see the amount of time it takes to load particular images. When I click on an image here, you can see it takes about 3 seconds to load, right? Click on an image, 3 seconds to load. If you're editing hundreds of files, that is just way too long, way too much time in between images. As you guys know, this is a common frustration with Lightroom that we have, and it's also something that I know that ON1 is aware of and they want to fix. Basically, the strengths of this program here, they're not really focused around the developing speed. It's really going to be focused on the actual development process engine. What I've found is that the color in this particular program is very, very accurate, very true to life. A lot better, I would say, than the standard color camera calibration profiles that come embedded in the Lightroom. I do like that the images that I am looking at here do reflect what I see on the back of my camera when I take these photos. That's a huge thing to me because I hate when I put my photos into Lightroom and Lightroom changes the color up on me. I do like keeping the color very, very consistent. So as I'm using here the processing engine, I'm going to look at things like contrast. I'm going to look at highlights. I'm going to look at shadows, and I'm going to look at my whites and my blacks. Now, contrast, highlights, and shadows all works very similar to Lightroom. Now, I would say that the contrast function here does work better than Lightroom in that it doesn't really affect the saturation that much, as opposed to Lightroom. When you reduce contrast or you increase contrast, you're definitely going to see differences in saturation. The shadow and highlight recovery here works very well as well too. You could see that I can actually make the highlights completely gray in this image. So dynamic range is off the charts in this program. Very good. On the shadow side, brightening shadows will brighten the entire image. I do prefer the shadow sliders in Lightroom a little bit more than I do here. Whereas in Lightroom, it acts more as fill light, whereas here, it will brighten up the entire image to the point where even some areas here are overexposed. All this being said, it does give you a lot more of a better dynamic range to work with when you're processing your image. Now, the whites and the black sliders work a little bit different than they do in Lightroom. The whites are actually very similar, and I do like this because it will affect just the brightest tones of the image here, just the very, very bright highlights, the very white parts of the image. Blacks, however, works differently. Now, blacks in Lightroom will render differently than it does here in Photo Raw. When I adjust the black slider in Photo Raw, it's actually adjusting the very far end of the histogram only, right? Now, when you make these adjustments in Lightroom, you will see that blacks will actually just reduce the dark contrast parts of the image, whereas here, it will actually give the image kind of a matte look if you bring it all the way up. That doesn't happen in Lightroom. You actually have to go and adjust the tone curve in order to get that same effect. When you adjust tone curve here in Photo Raw, you're actually getting the same effect as if you're moving these sliders around here too. So for instance, if I bring this all the way up, you can see what this image looks like. Then if I go here to our tone curve and I adjust this black point slider, you're getting the same effect in essence. So it's kind of two ways to do the same thing, but it is nice to have a little bit of a different functionality available to you like you do in Lightroom. So that's not a deal breaker. It does still work very well. It's just different than what I'm used to. The structure and the haze features here are very different. So structure will actually work like the clarity slider. It is a little bit different than clarity. It gives you a little bit more of an HDR look. You are definitely going to have less haloing in this program than you are in Lightroom if you adjust that all the way. But obviously, you can overdo it, as you can see there. Conversely, though, if you actually take the structure out of the image, it doesn't give it that like kind of 1980s glow look as you would get with Lightroom if you were to do the same thing with the clarity slider. Haze, however, will give you what I would call a diffuse glow in the bright and dark parts of the images, depending on what you're doing here. Now, bringing the haze down will darken up some of the highlights and the blacks. I'm not a really big fan of negative haze, I guess you would call it here, but you could add a little bit of a glow by using this slider moderately here. Temperature controls, obviously a very important aspect to raw conversions. We do have the ability to cool the image down and brighten it up. This is a very, very accurate white balance tool, should I say here. It works very, very well. I do love the color rendition. I love the warmer tones here. I like my images warmer. but it doesn't turn the images like that green yellow or that orange yellow. It actually is a very, very good balance. And I know the people at ON1 did work very hard to make sure that this was working properly. Also here, you'll see saturation and vibrance. With vibrance, you're going to be affecting some of the colors that are naturally occurring in the image without affecting skin tones. But if you actually push this button right here, you can even reduce the vibrance effect on skin tones even more. That's a great feature. I wish Lightroom had this. It really does work. Purity is another word for saturation in these two areas of the image. So for instance, in the shadows, if I bring the purity up, it's going to reduce the saturation in the shadows. Conversely, with highlights, same thing here. This is going to be really useful for Canon shooters because shadow areas are typically very saturated, and sometimes we have to reduce that saturation. Very, very easy tool to be able to do this. In addition here, you're going to have things like glow. It is an option for you. These are kind of a preferential option. If it is something that you like in your work, you can actually use that. And it gives your images a little bit of a glow. If you guys use Nik software, this is very similar to the Glam Glow effect in Color Effects Pro, but it's a lot quicker, obviously, to do this, as Nik is kind of outdated and in definite need for some updates that I don't think it will be getting, by the way. Noise reduction works very well here. I would say it's on par with Lightroom. Same exact modules as you're used to. And then you also have sharpening here. Now, sharpening works very good as well. The one thing I like about this, you have different options. You can use a high pass filter, an unsharp mask, which is my favorite, or the progressive filter as well too. Don't ask me the science or the engineering behind all those. I really don't have a good answer for you guys, but you can play with them until you get something that you like. There's also presets here, so you can fix out of focus images, which I mean doesn't really work that well, but it does help if the image is moderately out of focus to kind of hide that a little bit. You can sharpen for screen, for print, whatever you guys want to do. I'm going to reset this image just because it's getting a little muddy and I'm having a hard time showing you guys all the features here. Skin retouching. This is something I'm really excited about because our RAW processor, obviously, right now, Lightroom doesn't have skin retouching. That being said, this particular version of skin retouching needs a lot of work before it's perfect, but it is integrated and obviously will get better over time. 5 years from now, if this is included, it will eliminate the need for external editing or running your images through additional processors or plugins. You can adjust blemishes here. If I went and I took off everything real quick, basically the first thing you want to do is obviously select the skin tone. You're going to usually want to pick your light direction, which is coming from overhead in this case. So I'm going to click on his forehead. And then from here, your range is set to the middle ground. You can go ahead and smooth it out just a bit, but you can see what happens with smoothing. It does affect areas of the image that it shouldn't necessarily affect in the preview. But when you zoom in here, you don't see that effect being applied to things like the eyes and the nostrils and stuff like that. So just keep that in mind when you guys are previewing the software. It is a work in progress. It does work very well, but the larger preview of the image doesn't really show what it's doing. So you have to zoom in close, okay? This is an amazing feature to be included in a RAW processor. I definitely can see this being one of the main selling points for me as soon as Photo RAW works out the speed issues in the develop module. In addition here, you have your split tone features. Zoom out here. Split toning works just like it does in Lightroom. Same thing. You do have some presets obviously here already. You can save a new style. There's a lot of different options for you. I do use this even in Lightroom all the time, so it's nice to have a lot more options available to us here. Under transform here, we do have a lot of options that you would normally find in Lightroom as well too. These are things like your typical lens correction filters right here. So you have like rotation, you can fix your horizontal perspective, your vertical perspective, etc. All of those things. One thing that is missing right now is chromatic aberration corrections. I do think that is a big issue, especially for us Canon shooters who shoot on prime lenses. Those lenses do typically suffer from chromatic aberration, a lot of purple fringing. So I do hope that they include that in future releases of the software. You do have the vignette module as well here, which will allow you to add some vignetting to your image, adjust the brightness, the size, the feather, the roundness, and different types as well too. So these are other options that are expected in a RAW processor and available to you. One of the cool things I like are the embedded presets here. So you can see here, there's a lot of embedded presets. You can obviously make your own. These are going to be preferential. They're going to be different depending on who you are. But there's different things available for you, and I'm sure that third-party photographers are going to be making different presets available for this software as soon as it catches on and more mainstream. One thing that On1 did do, in addition to incorporating their browse program into the software, is also incorporate their effects program into it as well. So if you guys look here on the effects program, you can add different types of filters here. So these are effects that come from On1's other softwares. You have things like HDR, grunge, dynamic contrast. They'll all add a different look to the image right here. You can do stuff like blurring on the image. You can add sharpening. Skin retouching is there as an effect. But one of the things that I really do enjoy about all this is that you can actually work in layers. So the layers module is something that is definitely welcome. It's something that's found in software like Capture One and obviously Photoshop, but it is absent from Lightroom. So it is available here. You can create new layers that will give you the ability to basically work at different opacities and blend images together. So really, really exciting news that they included that into this version of Capture One. Going back to browse here, see. Overall, I would say that On1 is a work in progress. It's not perfect. Nothing's perfect in the world of software after only being released for a month, but it's definitely a step in the right direction, and it's giving us the ability to have a different option available to us rather than just Lightroom, which is something that will in fact move the industry forward as more and more competitors continue to release good alternatives. So I really do enjoy this software, guys. I think you guys should download it. Maybe wait a little while until some of these bugs get squashed. But once they do, it will give you a good alternative to Lightroom, and we definitely can see ourselves using this in our workflow in the near future. Thank you so much again for checking out my article, and I will get with you guys again in my next edition of Shutter Magazine.